We're going to be deploying a BYOC URSA cluster that has a direct integration with the Databricks Unity catalog. However, before we actually deploy that cluster, we need to set up a lot of the permissions, our Databricks workspace, those types of things. So this video is going to focus on a lot of those prerequisites, and then a subsequent video is going to actually go through the deployment process. So we're going to be deploying a workspace from Databricks, and that gets deployed into AWS. So we first need to be logged into AWS. That's the only reason I have this screen shown. So it's going to deploy into this account. Settings page, we'll have to make sure that we're using the enterprise feature and not the premium. So if yours currently says premium, you'll have to upgrade to the enterprise option. Next, we're going to create our workspace. I'm going to say create workspace using the quick start. We'll go to next, and we'll call this training workspace. And we'll select the region, the same region that is used for the where we're going to be deploying our StreamNative URSA BYOC cluster. There are directions in the documentation for cross-account permissions, but this is going to simplify it for this demonstration. And I'll say start quick start. It's going to send us over into AWS. I'll scroll down and say create stack. You need to acknowledge first, and then we can create that stack. If you wait just a few minutes, it can take a couple minutes, and refresh this page, you'll see that that training workspace is now showing up here as provisioning, so it won't show up right away. Wait a few more minutes, and then we want to wait for it to say running. Now that it shows as running, we can actually go into that workspace. Let me refresh again here, and the open icon will be available. We're going to create a user token, so if I go to my icon here in the top right corner and settings, I'll click developer, access tokens, manage, and say generate a new token. And I'll create a token with a comment StreamNative Unity catalog integration and a lifetime of 90 days. Let me go ahead and click generate, and I'll copy that. We're going to use this token to make a few changes. We're also going to use the token to make our catalog integration from the StreamNative UI, but there's also the option to use OAuth 2. Directions for using OAuth 2 to make the connection between the StreamNative cluster and Unity catalog are included in the documentation. And here we have our curl command to enable the IP access lists. I've made the edits of adding my access token and the authorization header. And then also for the HTTPS endpoint, I've copied the first part of my URL that's in the browser in the background from the HTTPS up to the .com, and then kept the remaining part, which is 2 forward slashes followed by the API. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that, and that will enable the IP access list. Next, back in my workspace, if I go to catalog, I'm going to go to the little gear icon up here, and under Metastore, we're going to enable external data access. Next, I need to grant privileges for the catalog. These directions may be slightly different if you're using OAuth 2 as your connection, but please view the documentation for that. For catalog, I'm going to you can use the training workspace catalog that comes by default, or you can create a new catalog. We will be specifying which catalog and schema to use at the time we create the connection, or we spin up the cluster, the StreamNative BYOC URSA cluster. I would like to continue using the training workspace catalog, and we can use the default schema. So once I click on it, though, I need to go to permissions and grant. Our principal, I'll say all account users. Again, the directions for this may be different if you're using OAuth 2 for the connection. And then I will do data editor as well as external use schema. If you're using the OAuth 2 settings for the principals, you will actually select the principal account that you're going to be using. Go ahead and click grant on that. We're going to grant the required permissions for the Databricks Unity catalog on our S3 bucket. Now, you can either create a custom S3 bucket for this portion, or you can use the existing bucket that was created from your cloud environment. If you aren't familiar with BYOC clusters, this is where you would have to now create the cloud environment, which is where StreamNative gets permissions into your cloud provider to create the required underlying infrastructure, which will then be used for the StreamNative BYOC URSA cluster. So to provide these permissions, we're going to provide them at the bucket level. And then inside of that bucket, specific objects will be created for different StreamNative clusters, including the one that we're going to be creating. So we're going to provide permissions at the higher level at the bucket. And since I've already created my cloud environment, that bucket exists. So to grant permissions onto that cloud environment bucket, I'm going to go to the gear icon credentials. I will click on this training workspace and I want this full IAM role. And then I'm going to give permissions onto the S3 bucket that's used by my cloud environment. Here I've gone into the StreamNative UI. I've already deployed my cloud connection and cloud environment, but of course not the cluster. We will be deploying that shortly. And this is the cloud environment I'm going to be using, AWS US W2. So that's the same region where we deployed our workspace. Test RNI 68. So let me go ahead and find that path in S3. So here we are in S3 in our buckets, and I found the corresponding bucket that uses the name tiered storage SNC. So I'm going to go to properties on that and copy that ARN. In IAM, I then go find that role that I copied out of the catalog. And here it is, the Databricks Workspace Stack D63 E7 catalog role. I'm going to click on its policy and then add two additional buckets here. The first one is the ARN with a /*, and I'll be sure to put that in quotes. And then the next one is just the full ARN itself. So you can see I'm copying the existing resource or example here. We're not going to be using that workspace, so I'm just adding in the ones for the bucket that's used by our cloud environment. I'll go ahead and click Next and save changes. And at this point, we're not quite finished setting up the Databricks Unique Catalog. We still need to create the external location, but the external location is going to reference the very specific data in the compaction folder that gets created by the StreamNative BYOC URSA cluster. I'm not going to create that external location because it doesn't exist yet. Next, we need to spin up our cluster.